record time. We're in the committee of the whole. The agenda lists the pledge.
Dealer's choice, sir.
It would do us good to stand since we're sitting for a while. Where is it?
Different place
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any citizens that wish to be heard now? Okay, the next item is the custodial outsourcing bid results. Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, we had our the bid opening for our custodial and custodial supervisory services RFP earlier this week. At your desk tonight is a very preliminary review of those results. We wanted to present this to you tonight, just the results as a requirement of the financial plan. This will kick off the actual evaluation. We have our RFP selection committee consisting of stakeholders from across the district that will be looking at this in greater detail and making a recommendation. After looking through the very thick books that we received from both of the bidders, we initially thought that we would be able to bring you a recommendation by January 22nd, but at this point we feel that that's maybe a little aggressive and anticipate that it may take a little bit longer to bring you a thorough recommendation and proposal with respect to this RFP. So at this point we intend to hold the public hearing on January 22nd at 5 o'clock as listed in the bid documents and as a requirement of
Section 528 of the school code.
Section 528 of the school code, just to present where we are with the process, but we will hold that hearing open and anticipate coming back at a later date to finalize the recommendation. So again, just to give you kind of an overview of what we received, at your place tonight we do have a summary page. There's 2 pages to it. The first page really kind of puts the proposal in perspective. So we have really a summary of our current staffing structure for custodians and engineers and supervision of those individuals. And that's really where the dollars are in the full-time positions. So if you look at this, currently we have one custodial director that oversees both the engineers and firemen and the custodians. And then each building we have a breakdown of the engineers and firemen full-time positions at each of those buildings. And you can see overall the total FTEs for the district as it's currently structured in-house is 86 full-time equivalents. That's 86 full-time positions. And the total salary and benefit cost for those individuals is $5.4 million. Also as a comparison in anticipation of going through this process, PFM did send up some experts to analyze our overall staffing structure, and they did come back with some recommendations based on comparisons they did with school districts across the state of Pennsylvania as well as some urban peers across the nation. And based on those comparisons, they determined that they felt that we could possibly eliminate about 10.5 custodial positions and still be within the same parameters as those peer groups. So with that, they would be proposing a reduction in staff of 10.5, which would take the total full-time equivalents from 86 to 75.5, and we did a rough estimate of what that would do if we were to maintain this service in-house and take those recommendations, and it would save us about $419,000. So that's where we are right now and where PFM recommended that we, areas where we may be able to save some money. Is there any questions on that piece before I get into the proposals?
Mr. Tidy?
Go ahead.
The one question I had was just a follow-up in the discussion that we had at another meeting was, we had brought up the just making sure that the comparison was including cafeteria cleaning was, I believe, just making sure that the other, I guess the comparisons were including all the work that our custodial staff do. I just didn't know if you had a chance to look at that.
No, this, again, we had 2 days to pull this together. This is a really high-level view to meet the requirements of the financial plan, but that is going to be some of the work that will be involved with the committee that's reviewing a lot of this.
Thank you.
So, yeah, we will look at this, we'll look at PFM's recommendations. At this point, when we get back into the proposals, you see that there's two very different proposals here. So I guess my initial thought is that as a committee, we need to determine what we feel is the best structure for our custodial staff in the district, and then work from there in evaluating both of those proposals.
So when we look at a .75 and .50, 0.25, essentially those people are part-time workers
They could be part-time or split between buildings.
or split between.
So you see that most of the partial positions are custodians, so a second shift individual could maybe split their time between Deal and Edison.
And so I keep going back to this conversation you and I have had a few times at least, where we used to have part-time custodials. And again, remind me of why we cannot do that again.
We could do that. We could do that. So again, I think that'll be the work of the committee to really look at all this. When we get into the proposal, you see that the one proposal has some significant savings, so we're going to have to, if we're moving towards trying to keep those positions in-house, we're going to have to find creative ways to save money to do that.
I will say when I was teaching that there were several of us that felt that that was a very good model, and that those people that came in and worked from 4 to 8 did a really good job.
Under the contract, can we make an adjustment like this of reducing the staff by 10.5? I'm sure we'd have to pay unemployment and such, but
Yes.
is it something you can do?
Yes.
Okay, so one alternative is to follow those
Adjusting staff,
recommendations?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyone else, any other discussion? Okay, the superintendent and Mr. Titus and I had a brief conversation about this, and he mentioned the public hearing that needs to be held, and the timeliness would make 22nd, 2 weeks from tonight, be the night. But as I hear him now, I'd like to reserve the right to reverse that and have, just talk about it in the next 2 weeks, whether or not that hearing could be after the regular meeting, because if we have that at 5, and then we won't have a committee of the whole meeting, I won't have time for one, and the regular meeting won't be able to necessarily start on time. It seems to me that if we had the committee of the whole at 5, as usual, the board meeting at 6, they tend not to last more than even an hour sometimes. I'd feel more comfortable having the hearing at the close of the board meeting, so that we're not crunched to have to hurry the hearing in case there's citizens who show up and want to speak. So anyway, I'm not making that a definitive ruling at the moment. I'm just saying, can we talk about that between now and then?
Attorney Walker and I did talk about that, and unfortunately, I believe that we are stuck with that time because that was what was indicated in the RFP.
Well, actually, Mr. Polito is correct that we are limited to that time. The statute actually specifically says that the public hearing is to be held before a regularly scheduled board meeting.
I forgot, I apologize.
It's okay, and I'm pulling the language up right now.
I apologize, you know the reason why I'm struggling to remember that. But what we can do is have that open at 5 o'clock. If we sense it's going to be a lengthy thing, we can recess it till after the board meeting.
Mr. Harkins, I believe, as you're going to see when Mr. Polito continues with his discussion on the proposals that were received, you're going to see that there's going to be a large amount of conversation, and I believe it's the administration's recommendation that we're going to have to recess that hearing until another date anyway, so that you can have a final recommendation. So yes, if
All right.
that 5 o'clock hearing is getting unwieldy, the anticipation is that we're going to have to recess it anyway before a final recommendation that can be made.
I just don't like to be vague about when the regular meeting starts and have it be, at the mercy of the hearing. I'd rather have it be the reverse, but I get the picture, so we'll leave it as is.
And I believe, Mr. Pluto, you're going to get into the two different,
Yes. So on the second page of the document that you have at your place tonight, we do have the two proposals and compare them to our current structure. So the first proposal we received was from ABM. They took a totally, I guess, unique look at our system and are proposing a complete overhaul of how we do things. You can see here that they propose district-wide supervision, having a custodial director, 2 custodial managers, which would be on second shift to oversee the cleaning at the elementary schools, and a clerical person. And then at the building levels, instead of engineers and firemen and custodians, they're proposing a day porter. That would be an individual on site for first shift to be there during the school day, and then cleaning hours afterwards, which is one thing that we need to follow up with them on. Mrs. Feeney, I'm not sure if they're proposing full-time or part-time on those positions. Some additional floor techs that would be focused at some of our bigger schools, but would be responsible for maintaining flooring throughout the district, and then 4 site supervisors at our 4 largest buildings. But the one thing that I would like to point out, if you look at the total FTEs for the building, they're proposing 69 FTEs. If you go to the first page, again, you see that currently we have 85 FTEs in the building, and the PFM recommendation was 74.5, so they're going below the PFM recommendation, which is something that has me a little concerned about the capability to actually get the cleaning done to the standards that we're used to. So that's an issue that we're going to have to follow up through the evaluation process. You can see overall with the decrease in the building and the increase in the supervision that they do have a net decrease in FTEs of 13. And the estimated annual cost savings, they gave us 4 different options, and all 4 of those options have the same exact staffing structure. The only difference in the pricing is what they would be offering the employees. So on the low end, as far as the cost proposal, they would be offering the employees basically $13.50 an hour for the custodians, and they would be providing them Affordable Care Act insurance. That's a very basic insurance package required under law. On the other end, they would be offering the day custodians something very similar to their current rate, and family coverage for the individuals that are full-time. So that's really the range in the cost from $3.2 million to $3.6 million. So overall, looking at that, and again with the caveat that there's a little concern about the overall FTEs, the potential savings is somewhere between $1.8 and $2.2 million. Any questions on that proposal?
This reference to engineers and firemen, that's kind of archaic language, isn't it? Isn't that just the head custodian in effect?
It's more of a hybrid position, so we do have boiler tenders on site as a result of a board resolution that we did repeal a few months back, and a city ordinance. So their responsibilities, I would say, are closer to probably 90% head custodial position and 10% more of the boiler tender type of.
Which we no longer need to comply with in most buildings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, this would result in a no tax increase year, right? Or close to it? If we accepted the ABM proposal.
Again, I think when you look at the proposal for the projections that PFM put together, they estimated about $1 million in savings for outsourcing both of those groups, and that resulted in a 2.4% tax increase annually. So this would probably bring that down closer to 2% or below that.
But when would this become effective? July 1st?
That,
In which you'd have a lot of unemployment claims and such,
right,
I'm sure.
which we
yeah.
do,
And
we
you-
have to factor
Yeah,
those in.
right.
They did factor those into the projections,
Yes.
but we'll have to factor that in as well. The other piece of this is we're working with two different labor groups. 1968, which has the custodians, their contract expires June 30th of this year, and the engineers and firemen are under Local 95, and they expire next year on June 30th. So it would be, if the boards chose to go with outsourcing both of those groups, it would be a staged approach.
The engineers and firemen would stay an additional year?
Yes.
Okay.
We,
I'll say this, I like the idea of one person being in each elementary school during the day. If they don't work out, you get rid of them. We've got 4 in these schools every day, and there's not enough work apparently to go around. So I like that ABM proposal where you have one person, and if they don't cut the mustard, they're out. And they have more supervision than we currently have in effect with what they're proposing.
yeah, we like the structure here, but the other thing I do want to point out is the custodians, not all of them are on first shift in our current configuration. So typically in an elementary school, we would have one engineer and one custodian, and the rest of the staff would be on second or third shift.
But where they're saying one person during the day, we have 2.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, and that falls in line with PFM's recommendation. That's basically where they felt
Yes.
that we
They
would
said
be
that
able
on-
to
Mhm.
maybe eliminate a daytime position at each of the elementary schools. If
There's
there's,
a discussion? Is that all for that topic, Mr. Superintendent?
I have one more proposal to go over, that's Met's. That's the second proposal, and Met's took a very different approach to this RFP process. They basically mimicked our existing staffing structure. However, they proposed 6 additional positions. So they proposed an additional custodial manager, assistant manager, which I believe would be second shift to oversee the cleaning. And then 5 additional custodians spread across some of the different buildings. So you can see that, the total increase again in FTEs is 6. And then based on the estimated cost in the RFP, their proposal would actually cost us about $900,000 a year.
Discussion on this?
Just one question, the newspaper said we came up light, it was 800, it was only gonna save 800,000, so this is good news to all of us. It's a hell of
Right.
a lot more than that. What were they doing, averaging? Because the one actually went over.
That was based on our initial look at the proposals right after the RFPs were open. And really, that was looking at ABM's proposal because they gave us 2 separate proposals, one for custodial supervision and one for custodial services. But what we didn't know at the time, and we had to follow up with a phone conversation with them today, was that they, again, took a very different approach to this. Their custodial supervision service just assumed that we would keep our engineers and custodians in place, and then they would provide the management staff to come in and oversee them. The overall custodial proposal is what you see here, but it incorporated the custodial supervision into it. So when we initially looked at the proposal, we thought we had to add the 2 together to come up with the cost, which was not the case.
And right now, aren't our custodians limited by the work rules among the various unions as to who can do what work in the buildings? Would that eliminate that kind of work rule restriction? You know, the carpenters are supposed to do certain things and painters are supposed to do other things. and-
There are some limitations on that, but this proposal does not envision outsourcing the trades, the carpenters and the HVAC and painters.
So they would still operate within the rules that,
Those
among those
individuals,
contracts.
right, this is only to outsource the custodians, which are in 1968, and that includes also the trades people and the classroom aides. So we would only be outsourcing the custodians. We would keep in-house the tradespeople, which they would still continue to fall under the collective bargaining agreement that we have in place. The custodians would not, because they would be hired by the company that we would select for outsourcing.
Well, to look at that, we have 86 in the custodian and the supervisors. How many do we have in the trades? How many employees, roughly? Okay, so much smaller.
Ms. Tyler?
So understanding when there's contracts in place that, and writing a new budget, that Mets may have been seeking just to increase their contract and their budget that they are receiving from the district. But I would be curious as to their rationale of actually increasing the amount of staff, and if they propose, or just to kind of compare so we could.
We did talk to them today too, and based on our initial conversation, we first of all do not believe that they read the financial plan, so they didn't fully understand the intent of the RFP and what our end goal was. So again, I think they took a approach more looking at a proposal that would be an easy transition from in-house to Mets.
Any other discussion? Mr. Superintendent, is that enough for this, or is there more?
That's all I have for this.
All right, no further discussion then on this? All right, next is budget transfers. Mr. Polito and Mr. Brockman.
Yes, so this is an item that we wanted to highlight on the agenda. This is something that we have not done in the past. I'm not a big fan of doing budget transfers because I like to have the budget stand as we initially adopted it so we can better analyze the areas we were over or under budget. However, in working through the financial improvement process, we've had a number of conversations with individuals down at PDE, and they pointed out to us that our tuition payments to the charter schools are based on budget numbers, not actual. So they recommended that at the end of each year, we propose budget transfers to take the budgetary expenses down to actual, and in almost every instance, when we do that, we're under budget on the expenditure. So this will take our budget numbers down to the actual so that we can bill the charter schools less than the budget, which is over the actual, if that makes sense.
Questions, comments?
I didn't explain that properly. So if we look at our overall budget, our expenditure budget is typically $200 million. Our actual budget comes in typically about 2% below that. So you say, we come in around $190 million instead of $2 million. We have to build the charter schools based on our budget numbers. So if we do budget transfers to take that $200 million down to $190 million, our actual expenditures, then that's the number that we use to calculate our charter tuition and build the charter schools. It's just a real weird quirk in the school code.
Discussion, questions?
Yeah, I didn't quite follow that yet, but if we budget 200 and we actually spend 190, we aren't penalized for initially proposing 200. We adjust that with the charters? I mean, obviously you start the year making payments based on the budget, and then as it goes along, if you're doing better, then...
So the calculation, they take the budget number from the previous year to calculate the current year's budget. So for this year that we're currently in, the 2019-20 school year, we're using budget numbers from the 18-19 school year. So we just completed the audit for 18-19. We presented those results to you at the last meeting. Again, we came in under budget on the expenses last year. So in order to use our actual expenditures on the PDE report, which we have to adjust our budget down to actual.
But do we get the money back from being a little high the prior year from the charters or not? They've already received and spent that money, right?
Right.
So we should budget tight.
Well, we can do it through the budget. That's
Yeah.
what the budget transfers do. So we can put, so for example, if we ended up $190 million and our budget was $200,000, we can put the difference of $10 million into a budgetary reserve account, which is not counted in that formula.
And if we accept this janitorial contract and save $2 million, that reduces the charter payments by
It's
$200,000 or something?
It's a 20% kicker. So when we're looking at saving about $1 million in 2 years, if we see that reduction, it would also reduce our charter tuition accordingly.
So an overall reduction of approximately 2% on our charter tuition?
I don't know what the actual number is. You have?
So not necessarily.
that much?
So what I do know is that if we use the budgetary numbers as they currently are versus what is being proposed as far as the transfer is concerned, the total amount that we would pay to the charters decreases by about $250,000. Just because what it does is it brings the regular ed tuition and the special ed tuition in line with what we actually spent the money on last year versus what was originally budgeted. And then to go back to your comment, Mr. Nichols, so right now the tuition bills and the invoices that we received are actually using the 17-18 years numbers. And until us as a district submit that directly to the charters and to PDE, they will continue to use the last year's rates. What happens is that there's a deadline for us. We have to submit what's called the PDE 363 that is going to spell out exactly what the expenditures are and what the tuition rate is. And then at that point, the charter schools can start using the new rates. At the end of every year, every charter school, every cyber charter school does an end of year reconciliation where we get billed by the student's ADM, so the average daily membership there. Right now, when we get our invoices, it's basically a student head count. They count up how many students are there. They multiply that number by the tuition rate for the whole year. They divide that total by 12, and that's what our monthly payment is. And so at the end of every year, we reconcile what the actual cost is.
They bill us on average daily attendance or?
So at the end of the year, the reconciliation is on average daily membership. So it's how many days a student was enrolled at the actual charter or cyber charter school.
Enrolled or
Enrolled,
not necessarily in attendance?
not in attendance, enrolled.
So the Rise Academy isn't helping us out with their 60%?
I'm not sure they're helping anyone out.
Okay.
It's a convoluted formula, so we're just following the recommendations to try to keep our payments at the minimum legally.
If I may add, Mr. President, if I may add one thing, not to make things more confusing, Mr. Nichols, but in prior years, the formula did allow for us to, when we did our reconciliation, to reconcile the amount of tuition that we would pay. Previously, 3-4 years ago, there were 4 different periods during the course of the year when your tuition amount would fluctuate. It would be based on your actual expenditures, your AFRs, the financial reports that you would put in with the state, and it would be on the basis of the census reports you have and the like. So as it fluctuates during the course of the year, you would change what you were paying, and then at the end of the year, your reconciliation would be not just confirming that the ADMs, the average daily membership, was correct throughout the course of the year, but then reconciling all the various tuition payments you had made during the end of the year to get to what your actual should have been. Because of a series of court cases that the charter schools have filed, they're no longer able to do that, and we're limited to one tuition rate set from the previous year's budget. So this budget transfer, which should put us in a line to have a more actual budget next time we do it, so we're not paying more than we should,
Yes.
based on a projected budget of more than what we may actually spend. So it's to our benefit to have a smaller budget to limit the tuition payments to the charters.
Right, because if we go over budget, it doesn't hurt us. When we go under budget, which is prudent planning, then they keep the money.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And what we're doing, again, is we're just adjusting it down to our actual expenditures.
Okay. Next item is collegiate renovations. Mr. Polito, Mr. Brockman.
So Mr. Brockman did a much better job of explaining the last topic, so I'm going to just turn it right to him to explain the collegiate renovations.
Okay, so at your seats, you have a couple of pieces of paper, all in the paper clip. The first thing that's the most noticeable is obviously these are the blueprints that I reviewed with you at the board retreat. I'm not going to review these again with you, but it was asked for you to have a copy of it, so I at least wanted to make sure you guys had a copy of it. I apologize if the font is very small, but this is the biggest paper that I can get it printed on without it being completely microscopic.
And we are in the process of getting those to you electronically. We're actually compiling that along with some of the PSSA data, but it's too big to email it to you, so we're creating a portal to dump this information in that hopefully we'll have done by Friday.
So as we get into the work for Collegiate Academy, which is going to be the biggest construction project that we will have done since the facilities plan has started, I figured it'd be a good place to start with where we are financially. So that is that first packet of information. So the first page outlines the total funds that we currently have available. As you can see, between the cash and investments, which does include the bond issue that the district took out 2 years ago, I believe, year and a half ago. The Stadium Commission transfer, which was payment for the turf, as well as the surplus and other transfers and other things, we currently have just north of $79.6 million left in the capital investments account, so that we can use all of that towards the facilities plan. Currently, to date, we've spent just a little bit more than $10 million. When you take a look at the total bids that were issued to date, which does include this $12.6 million, does include the district-wide security vestibule work, which is on the agenda for voting on January 22nd. We would have issued that $12.6 million. And so based on that estimate that we have from the facilities plan as far as the total amount that we were supposed to spend versus what we've technically already spent, the total projects are estimated to come in at a little bit more than $81 million. So based on that, based on the cash that we have on hand, what we've spent, minus the total estimated total work, you can see that right now in capital improvements, we're looking at $8.4 million in surplus, which could be used for either future renovations or if there are things that come up during the planning process for any future project that we can actually use. The next page is, and it's starting to get a little bit long, so I might have to start eliminating some of these things, but this is, to date, all of the projects that we have approved and does include the district-wide security vestibules, which we, again, hopefully will be awarding on January 22nd. When you take a look at the overall bottom line, you can see that the total cost so far for all of these projects is $10.9 million. The estimates from the architects for these projects is $12.6 million. So as of right now, when you take the totality of all of the construction projects that we have done or have going or will about to award, we are showing that we are under budget as compared to the facilities plan.
I have a question on that. You have two that are way over budget that are included here. You have Harding, budget of $1.2 million, bid of $2 million, so $800,000 over, 70% over. And you have a similar issue at repairs to the stadium. I mean, these are way, way off. Why would you include those? Why wouldn't you just say, we'll try that again next year? That's $1.6 million going down the drain if we take it. That's a lot of money.
And we already did take those, but that
Okay.
was a result of some, first of all, some unanticipated issues when, that they did not foresee when they built the estimates with the facilities plan. So when
Okay.
they started to go in and build the specs out, they identified some additional issues at Harding. At the stadium, we took some alternative bids that we felt we could afford based on our overall cash.
So that, these numbers looking so glaringly bad is because you're reflecting the original budget number and there were
Yes.
adjustments made?
Yes,
Okay.
so what we try to do
Just
with-
want you to know I read it, that's all.
So, and that's why we do this front report, because we always want to make sure that we have enough money in the bank to at least complete the projects that we proposed during phase one of the facilities plan. So and with these projects, as we've been moving through them, and we're going to see probably some pretty big challenges at both Collegiate and Erie High, there's going to be unanticipated expenditures. So, you know, as we move through and continue to invest money in the capital projects, it's our hope that we'll be able to, again, complete those, take care of those unanticipated expenses, and get everything done as we needed to, and not run out of money.
And I'm not feeling so poor as you made us feel at the last meeting when you told us that there was going to be a $53 million renovation in Fairview. I mean, it was in the paper. They're also putting a big addition on it, so it's not just renovation of that high school building. They're adding to it. So
I would love
we're
that.
not quite as poor as you were telling.
I would love that $53 million to put an addition on Erie High and knock a portion of it down, but unfortunately, we can't do that.
Right.
So with that being said, that's kind of the picture of where we are. Sometime last month, we met with all of the contractors at a pre-bid meeting for Collegiate Academy. There were at least 30 general contractors, basically primes that would be on the project at that meeting. And at that meeting, it was brought up to me by the contractors that they do have a concern with the responsible contractor provision board policy as it pertains to the subcontractors. Now, in the past, the work that we have done so far it's been a lot of work, but they've been relatively small projects. They've been kind of isolated little projects, a roof, a coal bunker, some paving, that were not something to the scale of Collegiate Academy. And as we looked at the during the board retreat, even Collegiate Academy is going to look small in comparison to what we are going to be doing at Erie High. At that meeting, they expressed their concern with being able to find subcontractors that would meet the provision of having an apprenticeship program so that they would be able to turn in complete bids.
Mr. Brockman, before we get any further into those concerns, Mr. Attorney Washer, can you review the overall bid process, including the responsible contractor for the board?
Yes, and a question was asked by a board member, and I appreciate giving me a little time so I can prepare for this, to be able to give that discussion as to what all do we have to do when we're bidding a project. In Pennsylvania, we have bidding thresholds. Those bidding thresholds increase on an annual basis. Currently, for 2020, any purchase or project that we do that's under $11,299, we can sole source that, meaning that we can just pick up the phone, call somebody, and hire them to do that, of course with board approval, but we don't have to bid it out. For any project between $11,300 and $20,999, we're required to get 3 quotes. Calling around, get 3 quotes, whether they be telephonic or they email something over. Any project that's in excess of $21,000, we have to enter into formal bidding, formal public bidding for that particular project or purchase. Now, we don't have to bid for professional services, whether it be for architects or engineers or attorneys. You don't bid those out. It's the law says that where the value of the service is of more importance than the price. Anybody can claim to be an architect, but you want one who actually knows what they're doing. You may have to pay for that. So when we look at a formal bidding, what does that mean? Well, formal bidding, and I'm only going to look at construction because that's the point of this conversation today, is governed by Pennsylvania law, but it's also governed by school board policy. Under Pennsylvania law, generally what happens is a bid specifications are prepared by the architect. That includes your project specifications, the provisions, and these are the legal requirements that must be included. Provisions requiring the hiring of competent workmen and the payment of prevailing wage, the prohibition of discrimination, the compliance with the Steel Products Compliance Act, bid security needs to be provided, performance bonds, the amount of 100% need to be secured, payment bonds need to be secured. We're required in Pennsylvania to build what's known as separate primes, meaning that you have to bid HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and general, all separate from each other. You can't include them all under one main contract. Those are the main issues when we're looking at bidding, is to make sure that all of those, each one of those issues are addressed in the law. Under school board policy, the board had adopted, I forget what year, but it's been a long time now, the responsible contracting with the school district of the City of Erie policy that was ultimately codified as policy 610.1. We have that on the books. Why do we do this? Well, when you award a bid to the lowest responsible bidder. And the board has the right to determine how it is. You can either put on paper how it is you're going to determine who is responsible or not. The Erie School District determined that it was going to put on paper who was responsible, what type of contractors would be determined to be responsible. The way that we do that is through making sure that they meet all these requirements. So in any project, any public works projects in excess of $25,000, which is the amount that is also the threshold for paying prevailing wage, so those two are tied together, the contractor has to show 2 things. 1, that they meet the workforce diversity requirements, and 2, that they're able to provide for the contractor certification. And under that contractor certification is also a subcontractor certification. I'll talk about that in a second. The workforce diversity requirements, I believe, are important, and even though they're not at issue here, we should at least explain what they are. The contractor and the subcontractors need to be able to show that they're providing a good faith effort to maximize the number of minority employees within the company. How do you do that? Well, contractors are required to interview graduates from the Erie School District and Housing Authority Step Up Pre-Apprenticeship Program. And they must send outreach letters indicating when positions are open to various community groups, such as public housing tenant organizations, public housing offices, Erie City and County Affirmative Action Offices, neighborhood centers, NAACP, the Multicultural Center, the International Institute, and various women's organizations that are located within the city. The contractor must also be able to document that those efforts were taken upon request by the school district. And we've gone so far as to draft letters, sample letters for them, so that they know what it is that we would find to be a compliant letter, so that they could send them off to these various entities when they're looking for new employees. If that doesn't work, the contractor must be able to convey to us the alternative methods of compliance that they have engaged in, and submit evidence of the firm's current and ongoing best faith efforts at achieving or maintaining workforce diversity. That's the first thing that the contractors have to comply with.
But there's not a fixed quota, it's just an objective, I mean, they need to be contacting certain people, but you're not looking at the end result?
We are unable to require quotas.
Okay.
This is as far as we're able to go. And this process, I actually
But
designed.
do we review it when we have people work? Do we say, okay, they had 50 people working there and there were 5 African Americans and 5 Hispanic people, et cetera?
I don't believe that we do. However, this is written in such a way as to require them to provide us proof of their efforts to make the hirings, not the actual
But
fact
that's
that
like
they've
shuffling the
hired.
papers. I mean, you want to see who's actually on the work site, but, okay, keep going.
That's where it is. This was modeled after the version of the community benefit agreement utilized by the Erie Civic Center Association, Erie Convention Center Association when they built the convention center. That's where I took that language from, as something that works in the city of Erie. There's also a contractor certification requirement. Now, the contractor is required, when they bid, to submit a certification indicating that they're properly licensed, that they meet the bonding requirements, they haven't been debarred or have defaulted on a project in the last 3 years, that they haven't had any their necessary licenses revoked or been cited for willful violation of safety laws in the last 3 years. They haven't been convicted of crimes related to their business within the past 10 years. They haven't had a violation in the past 3 years of wage and hour laws. And that they certify that they will pay prevailing wage. That they are certifying that they are in compliance with the workforce diversity requirements of our policy. That they have the necessary staff to perform or will have qualified subcontractors hired in order to perform. That they will maintain all qualifications during the course of the job and notify the Erie School District of any changes. The last requirement is that the contractor must participate in what is entitled a Class A apprenticeship program and have graduated employees from that program in at least 3 of the last 5 years. They must submit their certification with their bid. Then what happens, and they must also submit the certifications of the subcontractors at the time that they submit their bids. The subcontractors are held to those same standards. That the subcontractors need to comply with the workforce diversity requirements, and they have to comply with the contractor responsibility certification requirements, which includes the Class A apprenticeship program. The district then, when it makes a determination as to which entity is most likely is going to be awarded the contract, is required to then take those contractor responsibility certifications and subcontractor responsibility certifications and post them on our website for a period of 5 calendar days. Following that, and what that does is it allows the public the opportunity to comment as to whether the contractor or subcontractor does in fact comply with those standards. Following that, the district then issues what's known as a responsibility determination to both the contractor and the subcontractor. That's their get-out-of-jail-free card, so to speak. They meet all of our requirements. And at that point, then, the board is able to award the contract to them.
We don't have a federal set-aside program for minorities,
No, sir, we have no authorization to do that.
but we could. We could put that in our responsible party. I mean, we set that policy, it sounds like.
We can set policy, I'd have to look at it. I'm not, there isn't any specific authorization that I'm aware of, but I'd have to look at it
But
and see
that
if there's
minority
any prohibition.
contractor which assists females and minorities and federal contracting, it's not something that applies to us.
Are you speaking about maybe like the maybe-weeby determinations, the minority business owners, and then the women business owner?
Right,
Yeah.
which are federal, that's on federal contract.
We are not applicable to
Yeah,
those.
okay.
We do, I know that Mr. Brockman started a conversation regarding a concern by the contractors that they're having a concern meeting the subcontractor responsibility, and it's harming their bid preparation. In the past, we have had one contractor who had submitted a subcontractor to us, and it turned out the subcontractor misinterpreted it, and it was determined they didn't have any ill intent, but they in fact were not qualified to do the work. And they were so close to finishing the job that the board allowed them to finish it. It was, I believe, a situation where there was a concern as to whether there were other qualified contractors actually located in Erie. It's also been a concern in the past for the past boards, and in various projects where the architect has certified to us that glazers, there's no local glazers that have a Class A apprenticeship program, or other entities, the board's waived it for those particular projects.
So they've waived it, they've waived that, so so non-union contractors, only the unions have the apprenticeship programs, to my understanding, so.
That's the practical effect.
So when you waive that, the non-union contractors are able to bid it. You know, somebody like Shaw, for example, here and here.
Yes, sir. And the last thing I had on my schedule of notes to mention, just so you have the full picture of this policy, the school board has a standing resolution still on the books that was passed following our various fires and disasters, where compliance with responsible contracting is waived if the school board is engaging in the emergency contracting procedures because of some sort of disaster that has happened. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm sure that's all clear as mud, but that's at least all of the
But what's interesting
current legal
to me,
issues relative to this.
we, as a school district, set our policy there.
Yes, sir.
We can set that. I did not know that. That's not state mandated.
That the entire policy 610.1, responsible contracting with the district, I believe we had done research a few years ago, there may only be 2 or 3 districts that have this across the Commonwealth.
And back in the summer when we did the work on the stadium, we did end up waiving it for the contractor that was installing the turf, and the board members that were here at the time, if you recall, we did have a pretty lengthy discussion about subcontractors, that this would come up again, and that we would need to address it somehow. So I think tonight we do have, and I'll let Neil finish the concern raised by the subcontractors, but we do have a number of subcontractors that are going to be doing work on our buildings through this project, and even more so at Erie High, that just do not have apprenticeship programs. So we're going to have to develop some type of way to allow those individuals to bid on our projects. Otherwise, we aren't going to be able to get any bids for these projects. So I'll let Neil finish, and then we can have a discussion about some options.
So, going back to the upcoming work at Collegiate Academy, knowing the kind of all the work that is going to be happening there, just kind of looking through, I can tell you that there is going to be a need for some kind of landscaping. There is no apprenticeship program for that. There is going to need to be temporary fencing put up. There's no fencing apprenticeship program. We've got multiple doors going in, so then caulking is going to be needed, so there's no apprenticeship program for that. AV and gym equipment, because we're redoing the gyms, and that's not going to be work, that is going to be work that I would imagine the general contractor on the actual work is going to sub that out as well. Those are just a few things that the primes have been telling me that they've already identified work that they can't actually find a subcontractor who would meet the actual requirements of our policy. So because at this meeting, they started voicing some concerns, I had asked several of them if they would be willing to at least put their concerns down on paper so that it's not me telling you, third party. So at your seat, there are 4 letters. The first 2 in the packet are from local companies, both who have done work for us, and E.E. Austin, who is going to be, if the district-wide security vestibule awards if that gets passed on the 22nd, they are the primes on that. So those are both local. The ones in the back, Hudson Company and Thomas Construction, are based just north of Pittsburgh. They are both relatively big firms and have been looking at the Collegiate Academy project just because of how big of a project it is. And they are both very interested in actually putting in a bid. But as you read through some of the letters, you can see that they do have some concerns about what this requirement is doing to the jobs that I mentioned before, as well as some of the hiccups that this causes in just what an actual contractor does. Until I kind of started doing this, I really had no idea what an actual prime is doing. But essentially, the day of the bid opening, there's potentially going to be one person from these companies who is running around to different subcontractors, getting pricing, literally playing one sub off of another sub so that they can get the best price to include in their actual packet, so that in that turn, we're going to get the lowest total bid price. And then as one individual put it to me on the phone, when we award contracts, we don't award individual contracts to these subcontractors. We are only awarding something to whoever is the prime on that. So whether it's the GC on the general construction, or the plumbing, or the electric, whoever the prime is, that's who we have a contract with. We don't have a legal binding agreement with those subcontractors. And so if there is any kind of liability, we go back to the primes. If there is something which, at the same time, that means that whoever the prime is, they set the standard. So if we want to hold a high bar, if we want to set a high standard for quality work, and we want that apprenticeship program to be there for the general contractors, I agree, that makes perfect sense. Whoever he hires out to sub then has to meet that end of their standard. So that standard is kind of set.
Well, I'm aware this was brought up to the board last year, and I think it was resoundingly defeated. I know it was in Mr. Zogby's report recommended that we change that. We're only one or two districts that do it in the state. We're doing all this construction work, and this is making your job more difficult, and it's going to make the bids higher. I'd like to hear from the members that voted for this last year why they did vote for it. Is it just because you're a Democrat and you vote for supporting unions, or what was the reason that the state was defied as to what they recommended in their report? And I think the administration was pro this change. I'd like to hear reasons why this was not changed.
I think it was an intent by those board members and prior boards to ensure that the workers were well trained and prepared. There had been an instance where a roofing contractor bid a contract, and then he went out and hired the big ones, some bums off the street, and said, "You're going to be my roofing workers, go on up there and fix the roof at the high school." So we wanted, with good intentions, to establish a practice that we would seek companies to have apprenticeship programs to train their workers, so that when those, and it was in their best interest to have them in many cases, that they would have well-trained workers that we could count on that training, and if they weren't just grabbed and paid by a prime contractor or a subprime contractor who just step in and go to work and maybe not be reliable or competent. That's a general stab at what we hoped, I think, or intended to do.
But to respond to that, the requirements that were set forth were they have to put up a payment bond, they haven't been cited for various things, their licenses are in place. I mean, there are safeguards in that policy, other than that apprenticeship program. So I think we're just making our job more difficult by not going along with what was recommended on
Recommended by who, Senator?
Mr. Zogby's report.
Okay.
And I think it was
It was
put
pointed out to
forward
us.
by the administration as well.
It was pointed out to us that the state, Mr. Walker, I believe, said the state requirements were adequate. We were attempting to lead in a good direction, but I'm a practical person. I don't want to stand in the way of progress. I don't want to drive up the cost unnecessarily. I don't want leverage in either direction. I don't want our good intentions to be leveraged downward by people finding a way to avoid that, nor do I want to, and I recognize we don't have the leverage to force these companies to change in the direction that we wish they would. So
Well,
I'm
it concerns
flexible.
me just looking at the bids up there at Collegiate. For example, on electric, you only had one bid, right? Newco? I mean, Church and Murdoch didn't bid that?
For the security vestibules, yes, we only did have the one electric bid.
And was that high, low, in the middle, or it just, you want to get more than one bid, I would think.
You do want to get more than one bid. And typically for the electric, it's going to be your Church and Murdochs or your Newcos. Those are pretty much the main two have done the lion's share of the electric work for the construction contracts that we've awarded so far.
Is Keystone still active, or?
Keystone they bid and won the service center roof, but that was the first time that they had bid on any of the work that we put out. So that was all of the construction work that happened during the summer. They didn't put in a single bid, and it wasn't until the service center that they finally put one in.
Was that electric bid in line with your expectations, or
For the service center,
for the one that Newco just took, where it was the sole bidder?
It was well below,
yeah.
Okay.
yeah. And this one is very hard to really determine, what the impact is, because there's so many variables out there, like the construction market and the projects going on in the area. One thing I'd like to say, when we did look at this last time, I was supportive of, and still am supportive of the proposal built in the plan. I think it does has a nice balance between ensuring that we do get a responsible contractor and opening up competition, but I certainly understand the board's concern with that. And really looking at the prime contractors, 90% of them are going to be qualified under this responsible contractor and have apprenticeship programs. I think the issue that we're looking at now, and we wanted to bring to you before the bids are submitted on Collegiate, is really this subcontractor issue. And I think there's two things that we'd like you to possibly consider. One, if you look through the letters, you can see that most of these subcontractors, for the reasons that Mr. Brockman spelled out, are asking us to waive or at least modify our policy so that it doesn't apply to the subcontractors. I think that would be a good compromise, again, given that the general contractors are the ones ultimately responsible for this. However, if the board is not comfortable doing this, at a minimum, we need to come up with some type of revision to that policy to provide a vehicle for them to submit bids when there are no subcontractors out there that do meet those qualifications. So to me, as far as getting through this next project, those are the two things I would like to ask you to consider.
Because what is going to happen otherwise is, as you were pointing out, if they're not finding subs that qualify, then they have to request waivers, then you have to bring it here, we've got to vote on it, and then the same thing. I mean, we should address that on a blanket basis, I think, so you can move forward and we can work on other pressing issues in the district.
I think that's what he's saying,
Yeah.
something that he wants to do, but in the meantime, as the policy exists, as long as we're aware that it's in our best interest to be flexible, and if waivers need to be granted, whatever, I want to facilitate.
So,
whatever
yes.
works.
Right now, we did move the bid opening back to January 30th.
Correct.
on collegiate, based on some requests from the contractors, they needed more time because of the work out there. But whatever we were going to do on this, we need to do it before the bid date. Otherwise, they're held to the policy that is in place. So that is another option. We could not do anything, but again, that runs a risk of them not being able to submit bids because we don't have those subcontractors available to do the work that meet.
And this is work we want to get done this summer,
Yes,
and that means it needs to
Yes.
get underway.
so looking at that, I mean, there is an
Well,
option that.
Couldn't we offer a general waiver just on that bid? I know what
Yes.
the president is pointing out, when we grant waivers, we're getting a feel for it, but
Right.
rather than doing every one for that, why shouldn't we approve a waiver for all the bids on that one and see what happens?
Mr. Titus, then the superintendent.
Would it be possible then for us to pull up new drafts of resolutions with the maybe potential recommendations moving forward with adjusting, waivers or a subcontractor not being held to the same apprenticeship program, to have variations that we could look at as a board to see how that this could play out? Going back to, just discussions that we had had before when this came up over the summer, I was somebody who did vote on behalf of the responsible contracting, not because I was a Democrat, but because I really did believe in the apprenticeship program and creating job skills and what our students deserve within the district of having living wages. But I do, again, note that our community as a whole deserves to have schools that are functional and for us to get the work done. And I don't want us to be, I guess, stubborn in the sense that we're not going to be flexible. And I think that I've seen a few nodding heads that this absolutely deserves our attention again. And so I would request that we have possible drawn up just policy changes that would maybe amend to all of those.
But I think to help us with that, if we would approve a waiver for this one bid, it would be an experiment, and it would simplify what they're trying to do and keep us on schedule for work that necessarily you need to do in the summer, right? So if we don't get this in place, it's gonna fall till next year, we'll have to be rebid then, and on and on and on.
It would push us back, yes.
Yes.
So if the bids failed on June 30th, then we would come back to you and probably propose a rebid with the waivers in it, which would push us back probably about 2 months for the bid opening, which the whole reason we did it early is because we want to start at the beginning of the construction season before these contractors are busy.
Yeah, again, the estimate of the work being done at collegiate being, depending on what alternates are accepted, I mean, we're looking at anywhere between $10 and $12 million. This is a project that most of these construction firms are going to want to put a very competitive bid in because they want the work.
So logistically and practically speaking, from the board, what you need from us is either a waiver or by when? Like what are timeline
We would need a
Right now.
waiver to be put on next week's agenda.
I move that we do that.
Well, what
22nd, I'm sorry.
What Sumner and Tyler are proposing are two different approaches. One is to alter policy forevermore, and the other one, as I understand it, the other one is to just be generous with waiving. So I would like to first ask the superintendent what the administration, the solicitor, him and Neil would like us to do in this case. Just get through this situation, or get into revamping the policy overall now. Practically, what's the best approach for us?
Could I recommend a combination of both, where we move ahead with some type of waiver for this collegiate project to keep that moving, but also
And
maybe...
Erie High, or
Erie High is going to happen later on this year, so
deal with
it's,
that then?
what I would recommend, if the board is interested in revisiting this, maybe we need to get the policy committee back together and bring you a couple different options as different ways to address the subcontractor issue to consider over the next couple months before we get into the next big bid.
All right, but to keep this moving, you have a specific suggestion that we have a resolution on the 22nd, 2 weeks from tonight, to, in effect, be liberal with waiving where it's appropriate and making that known ahead of time?
Yeah, so if the board chooses to adopt a waiver for the subcontracting responsibility certifications for the Collegiate Academy work, what that would mean is that the architects would have to send out an addendum, so that an addendum to their contract, which they have already issued one addendum to the original contract book. Essentially, that would go out to any contractor, who has the actual spec books. They get the addendums, they have to sign off on it. So if the board passes that on the 22nd, I could let the architects know, and they could send the addendum out on the 23rd, which would give all of the potential primes who would be bidding a full week to make adjustments and make sure that they have those subcontractors lined up.
It would seem that that would solve our immediate concern with this project, and then we could, after that, or simultaneously begin to undertake a look at revising the policy. How does that sound to everyone to have that approach?
I'm unclear as to what we're waiving. Are we waiving everything, or are we just waiving the fencing, the landscaping, the caulking,
With the subcontract.
Yeah, with the subcontracting?
All
Okay.
subcontract.
All subcontract.
All subcontractors?
That's an option, we could go either
All,
way.
all
At
subcontractors or
this
just?
point, based on the concerns raised in these letters about the timing with this,
Yes.
I would recommend that we do all of it.
Right.
But at a minimum, if we want to just, if you look at the E.E. Austin letter, you can see in the last paragraph, he proposes just submitting a written explanation when a certification cannot be obtained. That would be another option that we could use on this.
And I read that letter, and that is where I would be recommending. So we follow what E.E. Austin is recommending.
Is that workable?
Yes.
Okay.
I do have a question, though, as to why do we have to front-load the subcontractors, certain numbers? Is it because then they're locked into using those contractors?
They-
And are we allowed to give them more time to give us that information?
They use those numbers to build out their bid.
Their bid,
So if
okay.
they move ahead and do not obtain that information from a subcontractor, and that subcontractor turns out to not be deemed a responsible contractor under a policy, they would have to go to the next highest bidder, which would increase their cost.
Our costs are increased because we have this Byzantine structure here. There's only a couple districts in the state that have this. This is costing months and millions of dollars because we stick to this.
So far,
We
it
just
has-
looked
has
at this
improved.
janitorial contract, they can save $2 million. Well, what are the real estate taxes here? 50 million?
Roughly.
That's a 4% savings. I'm embarrassed that that bid is so large. That indicates a problem here on how we're spending money. And I think we should waive it as to all subcontractors on this contract. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, and let's do something. Let's do something to move the district forward. This is so obvious. This is an experiment. We do it on the one. These are difficult contracts when they go into these old buildings and have to do them, and the Erie High School one is even worse. These are not prime jobs for anybody to go in. They want a clean sheet. These are not clean sheet jobs, and any help we can give this work, and our man who's in charge of it, we should provide it. This is tough to get bids on work like this.
Could I just ask, what is the underlining meaning of why we have to have apprentice programs? I mean, is it something with unions or
Yes.
why? I'm not sure. I was at the board meeting when it was, and I saw that the gentleman did come up and they were, you know, making a stance, but I have to agree with you that why are we being held to the standard? It shortchanged us. I don't know.
Apprentice
If
program-
somebody could give me a good reason, please, I mean,
Based upon my conversations with a lot of these individuals, and I have not talked to E.E. Austin, so I will follow up. And I was reading the letters, Neil, as you were talking, because kind of had an idea about these numbers from before. The apprenticeship program does absolutely ease my mind in knowing that we have quality workmen that are, when they come across something that they come across something in a job, they are trained and skilled on a higher level to be able to fix that problem without costing us more money in the long run, which is what happened with our roofing years ago, where we didn't have people on that job who were trained in an apprenticeship program, and ran into problems, and it cost the district and the taxpayers money. So everybody that I have talked to about this issue has convinced me that these apprenticeship programs are important. They're also important to our students, I believe. I'd love to see us getting more programs within Central Tech where we can actually get our ready workforce trained with pre-apprenticeship programs in Central Tech. And we could be saving our students money on that too. So it's just based, I've talked to a lot of people on the state level. It was just the advice that I was given, that you have something that is a great policy and you shouldn't quickly give it up.
2 districts have this in the state.
Yeah,
We're different.
we are different.
We need, the more bidders you have, the better shape
I
you're in.
agree. I agree
We are
with you, Sonia.
choking off getting bidders. We're spending millions we shouldn't have to.
Potentially.
The unions are protected by prevailing wage,
Well,
and
okay,
just
so
the
then
whole
here's the-
idea of
here's
this
the thing.
program, we've got the extra money, we're putting it into the buildings, it's adding to construction work in Erie. We've done a lot for the construction industry in Erie with what the board achieved before I was on it with the additional funds and such. But we need to get rid of this choke point so we can move faster and spend less money.
So Sumner,
You didn't listen to the explanation given by the attorney on how this works. It's all paper shuffling. You have to have contacted this group. You have to contact that group. But we don't follow up on it. Nobody knows how many apprentices are working and such as that. It's a bunch of paper shuffling. It should be eliminated to reduce our
But the
costs
apprenticeship-
and move us
I
forward.
don't think the apprenticeship program is the paper shuffling.
I'm saying to qualify for it, if you listen to him, it's a matter of you have to have contacted this group and that group and this group and that group. You don't have to show any result from that. It's Byzantine. And it's costing taxpayers money.
Potentially, Sumner, it hasn't yet.
It hasn't.
It hasn't cost taxpayers extra.
It
And
cost
the
us money on a
majority-
glazing contract just last year.
If a majority of the board wants to move in a different direction, it can. 3 members are absent tonight. If the policy is going to be revisited, so be it. But in the short term, all we need to do is, as we were just discussing a few minutes ago, be open to waiving these
Yes.
situations here, and then we can simultaneously undertake revisiting the policy. And if the new board wants to take a new position or modify or whatever it wants to do, but I think Darlene is, I'm aligned with Darlene's kind of thinking, is we don't want to slingshot and completely reverse and undo what's in place with some good results and some good intentions. Just, it can be modified, and, you know, it's like throwing out Obamacare. Is it all bad? And, you know, can something be saved? How can we improve it? So I think what we need to do is respond to the administration's concern that we don't choke ourselves out of this specific situation, then revisit in advance of the Erie High and other projects, and we can do it all. Just, I want to be a voice, I think, like I'm hearing Darlene say, to just move and address what needs to be addressed as it needs to be.
Well, I agree with that. It takes some time to
Right.
adjust a policy, but what they've requested is a waiver for these collegiate bids, which we have to do right away for that to happen.
We're for
That's a
that, I
one-off,
think so.
and that's all I'm asking for at this point, to give it a try. Because I understand there's other factors, but we've got this and the even bigger Erie bids coming, and for us to do it on collegiate, we're at least trying something different, and it may or may not work, but we'll learn something from it.
So I'm asking the administration to, with its understanding of where we are and what the policy is, to map out the best course that they think they need to present to the contractors right now to get us through this bottleneck, if that's what you call it, I think. So we're agreeing. I think everybody wants to do what
Yeah.
we're saying. So can you do that?
Just to clarify, I think we would prefer to do it on all subcontractors, but certainly understand if the board needs to take more time to study that. So the last I heard that we were only gonna be waiving it on subcontractors using the E.E. Austin proposal that could not submit a proof of apprenticeship program.
Can the three of you develop a resolution for the 22nd meeting for us to act on, get it to us in advance? And we have 2 weeks to ponder it, and whatever you think is the best language to put in that resolution that gets us to accomplish what we want to do with these waivers in this instance. Can you do that? And then we have time to react to that before, in advance of, and at the meeting. Can we do that way? Mr. Walker?
Mr. President, my concern is that because of the public hearing on the outsourcing at the meeting of the 22nd, the committee of the whole will be canceled. So we will not have an opportunity for the board to review and consider whether we should go with a E.E. Austin style approach where they're suggesting that they give an explanation or just a waiver of all subcontracting. I think it would be easier if we could come to a consensus so we knew which direction the board wanted us to proceed at the next meeting.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do, is to take what you're hearing here, and you have our faith that you can come up with what.
I'm hearing two different directions.
All right, well, I'm struggling to explain it, but I thought if you could come up with an approach that you are comfortable going to the contractors with, that we are flexible on this, whatever waivers are needed in this case, and then, not part of the resolution, but just we understand that we're going to have the policy committee review the whole policy in advance of the next round of bids. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, I'm just taking my best at it, but I'm just saying, whatever you come up with, we can modify, amend the night of the meeting. And in reaction to what you said, Tim, we could call a committee of the whole meeting for 4 o'clock. We could have a meeting, a committee of the whole meeting in advance of that hearing, leave the hearing at 5, and then have the board meeting at 6.
So may I recommend that we provide, it sounds like we have 2 on the table, we'll bring you 2 resolutions.
That's
to-
okay with
For
me.
discussion, and we'll go from there.
Yep.
Or we could vote on, I mean, I don't have a problem with either one of them. The administration's requested waive it for all subcontractors. It's also suggested, follow the
Follow
E.E.
E.E.
Austin. Do we want to vote on that tonight, just to make it
We
easier?
can't.
We can't?
Well, we
Okay.
can't vote.
Okay.
But we can.
Or just a show of hands or something? or-
Well, Mr. Walker?
Mr. Mr. President, at this time, it would be nice to, it would be helpful for me to know which way to write the resolution if we were going to present one, if a consensus could be determined, and if you could direct each board member to say whether they would prefer a full waiver or of all subcontractor requirements, or the E.E. Austin approach, which is requiring the prime contractor to give a reason as to why they cannot provide a subcontractor certification.
And if so, then we can waive it.
And then we'll accept their rationale. And if you could ask each one of the board members which way they would prefer to go, then I will mark that down and I'll know which way to write the resolution so the board can proceed on the 22nd.
Before we would do that, if we do either, is one preferable to the administration in its professional opinion in dealing with this stuff? What would you prefer before we call upon the board to express
And again,
itself?
this comes back to, it's hard to determine the actual impact of these, but given the concerns raised by these 4 contractors about the timing issue that is created by the certification of the subcontractors. Our concern is that if we don't waive all of them, that it is going to extremely limit the subcontractor pool and result in some of them not submitting a bid. Again, we can't prove that that'll happen or even determine what the impact is probably until after the bid. So we would prefer to waive all at this point and to continue to study it, but certainly understand the board's position and don't want to make you feel like we're pushing you to do something. So we are perfectly fine with the alternate option as proposed by E. Austin.
I wouldn't want us to make a partial move and have it be inadequate to solve the situation we're in, so you just answered
So,
that.
yeah, the partial move will solve our immediate problem. If we waive it all, we just feel that we were going to get better bids.
And we're not resolving the policy, we're just doing it just one-off,
Yes.
so we're gonna see what happens. I would move that we go the way that the
We can't have a
administration is
resolution to
recommending.
vote on.
Yeah.
We'll have each board
Just-
member
sure.
express from what they've heard.
I would favor the full waiver.
All right. Whoever's noting that, there's one for that. Okay, Mr. Walters. I would have started at one end and come this way. That's all right, son. Lori, do you want to express an opinion,
I mean,
a preference?
my preference is to go with what our administration is recommending.
Okay.
Mainly because, I mean, I don't have enough information and background.
That's
you know what I
fine.
mean? So I'm okay with that.
That's fine. Darlene?
I prefer staying with the E.E. Austin approach at this point, where they give us a written explanation until I have opportunities to talk to some of our local contractors and tell them we need bids. And whether they're going to be able to do this process, I guess I want to sit down back at the table with the people that I talked to before when I made my decision. So I want to go back to those contractors, because I appreciate these letters that Neil has provided us with, and certainly I am open to changing my mind once, but I do want some time to have those conversations. So for right now, I would be happy with waiving the requirement for subcontractors and a written explanation as to why they cannot provide us with that.
And if there's, just
That
because
explains what I
got it.
You got it? Okay.
there are 3 board members not here, so we're going to leave this meeting with a little bit of uncertainty unless, so if, if, I still see Darlene's approach as working as well, because if a waiver could be granted, could not a waiver be granted after that letter comes from E.E. Austin or some company? Or is it too late? Is that the
I
point?
think the concern is that they won't put the bid in at all
Yeah.
All right,
because
all
of this
right.
So
requirement.
again, I think
That's the concern.
That's the problem with a waiver after the fact.
All
They
right.
have to guess it, they have to submit a bid that doesn't qualify in hopes we're gonna waive it.
All right,
And I'm
Who's
not-
gonna go to that trouble? That's why we need to waive.
all right, so I
Now.
understand.
And I'm not saying I'm going to change my vote, but I may after I have conversations with
Well, that's what I mean, we have 2 weeks before we're going to vote on it, so I just was trying to leave a little room for us to accommodate the 3 board members who weren't here and for us to process it. Mr. Superintendent?
just to clarify on the sub, one thing that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a big portion of this contract is masonry work.
Correct.
And we do not have any local masonry companies that are qualified under the policy that could bid for the work as a subcontractor, including some of the ones that we have used in the past. So I think that's some of the concerns and the urgency here with these contractors, that a big chunk of this project it will not qualify for a local company, and we'll have to move outside of the region to get a qualified contractor under the responsible contractor.
So, to follow up, last Friday, I had a conversation with Ken from E.E. Austin, in which he was talking about the subcontractor responsibility and how to handle it and everything else. And during that conversation, it was me telling him the names of masonry people that we have used that have apprenticeship programs, because everyone that we've used so far, Marza, which is doing the service center, Allegheny Restoration, and Wilson Restoration, all 3 of those are based out of Pittsburgh. There isn't a local union shop in Erie, even though Northwest Restoration and I believe Fisk they are both, have come pretty highly qualified to do the work, they don't meet the requirement. And I guess I don't see myself as the one who should be telling the general contractors where to look for masonry people.
Okay, Tyler, you have an opinion to express?
Alex has too. At this point in time, I am open to waiving for the subcontractors. I do want to understand more, and I do want to understand the ramifications of us, the apprenticeship program, pushing out business to Pittsburgh or other entities where we can't use the businesses or the workers here in Erie. So I do want to understand more on that end. But for the collegiate program part, I am receptive to the site. Yes.
I would sum up my opinion to be very similar to Tyler's. But I just want to tell board members, this isn't a binding vote. This is an expression of opinion so that the solicitor has a concept to proceed from. So, and we don't want to mislead him and make him an about face, but I'm just saying this is not a vote. This is a consensus-taking, opinion expression. Was I clear on my answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Rose?
I have to go with Summer. Unless someone can prove to me why does everything have to revolve around an apprentice program? I know they're good, I know our kids are in them, but, we're in a business. We've got to look at everything. We've got to look at money. Our kids can't read, they're not reading. So, that's my opinion.
Gwen?
Gwen?
I'm gonna take a wait and see approach, as Darlene said. We need to listen and see what it is that they can offer. And if we know that a lot of these individuals may come from out of Erie, maybe even out of state, we may have to step back and say, why? So maybe we need to look at some apprentice programs that might need to be within those areas. Because we're losing those individuals because of lack of employment. So I would like to wait and hear more of what it is.
Every board member has a right to their opinion, and 3 board members are not here, and we should make some attempt in the near future to find out, Angela, what...
There's only 2 board members not here.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Oh, you didn't have me here?
Well, at the beginning, we had, we did.
Yeah, we had counted you out, honey.
Mr. President, to sum it up, if I may,
Yeah,
5 members have indicated that they would consider supporting a resolution offering a full waiver for all subcontractors, specifically at the collegiate project alone. So with that direction, I'm going to draft a resolution that will be placed on the agenda doing that, limiting it to collegiate and having full subcontractor waiver. It still requires the general contractor to have be fully compliant with the responsible contracting policy.
okay.
And Attorney Walker, I'd also suggest that we prepare the alternate resolution, just waiving those groups that do not have the, cannot provide the proof of the apprenticeship program, so that we do have that available in case the board determines that they cannot support this next week, and that way we will have something available to keep the project moving.
I will.
That's
I will.
good. That's a
I will
good
be
approach.
prepared, Mr.
Thank you very much.
That's a good approach, and we do have an option in the next 2 weeks to decide whether we should have a committee of the whole for this or any other reason ahead of that public hearing.
Yes, sir.
And we'll, from what we heard, we'll see about the policy review committee meeting and dealing with revised look at the existing policy.
I will prepare a few options as I see them to accomplish these things at the policy level, but we can deal with that after the 22nd.
The policy review committee existed a year ago of me, Mr. Titus, and Mr. Spagel. And would any new board members want to participate in that? Be included in that? If not officially as a committee member, you could attend the meeting when it happens. Either way is an option. Darlene? Okay.
Yeah, I would like to.
I assumed you would, so. But I'm saying, in either case, either as a committee member or just be made aware of when the meeting is and participate in it, just like you did with the. All right, so Sumner and Darlene,
Thank you.
make note of that.
Done.
All right, we're done with that for now. Neil, are we?
Oh, we're done.
Okay.
Thanks, Neil.
Middle school math curriculum recommendation.
So in front of you are examples from the new program that we're hoping to implement in the fall of 2020. Just to give the new board members an idea of what has happened with our elementary schools, last year the committee, which is a group of teachers and administrators working together, review and they look at best practices, they look at the ed reports and determine which program would best fit for our district. So that had happened last year. At this time, we did the same thing with the literacy, and then we did the math. Currently, Nora is working with the committees that are working, and they are posted. The teachers and administrators are a part of it. She started with the one for math, that's why that's in front of you, and then Nora will be bringing to the table literacy for middle school. We have literacy for the high school. We are currently working on algebra, geometry for the high school, as well as biology. And those are the areas that this year we have committed to working towards improving our curriculum, and that as well is part of the financial plan. It is part of our job to do that. So Nora has a summary that she has worked on with the committee, going through why this program is in front of you today. We also have, as part of the piece for the 22nd, will be the proposal of professional development that would take place, as well as the materials that would be accepted and technology for middle school, which is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Our 3 buildings, which is Wilson, Strong Vincent East, as well as Emerson Gridley, that handles any of that middle school age bracket, and the Eagle's Nest. So Nora?
Thank you, Dee. So I have a 1-page, well, it's really 2 pages, but I printed it on one piece of paper, that summarizes the work that was done for this. If you could pass, please. Thank you. So those are coming around. And it gives a very high-level view of considerations that the committee took into account, and the research that we were doing and our areas of focus. Does everybody have those? Okay, so if you want to take a moment to read up to the chart, and then I'll take any questions.
Nora, what were the 4 programs that they reviewed?
Reveal.
Oh,
Is
I'm
that
sorry.
your company? I know, we had Ready, Reveal, Agile Mind, and Carnegie Learning. Those were the 4 that we got the materials for in hand so that we could look at them and, evaluate what does this look like for the student, what does the teacher material look like, And then,
And it may be on here and I didn't read it, but are these all on ed reports?
they are,
Okay.
and they were all top rated.
And they're all top rated, thank you.
We narrowed it down to 2 that we met our non-negotiable criteria, as well as all of the research and standards that we were holding it up against. And that was the 2 that we had vendors come in and actually do the presentation explaining all of the aspects of their programs. That was Reveal and Ready. So we were down to those 2, and then the committee selected Ready. And that was a hard selection, especially since they were both very well-rated materials.
How close was it?
It was 2 to 5. But they were very well matched. So you can see in the numbered list the information that supported our choice for this particular material. Data analysis of proficiency levels is in the chart below, and it flows over into the back as well. But it shows several districts that have implemented the Ready Mathematics program and how over years their proficiency levels have changed. And some of them go up and some of them do not, which is it's a very realistic picture of what we can experience, because materials don't make proficiency. It's a combination of materials and effective teaching practices and quality professional development. You know, that and many other factors go in to making this successful. But we can see that we don't exactly know what happened at McGuffey, because they had a precipitous decline.
Interestingly enough, after we got this, I contacted a few of the districts to see why they chose this particular place, how is the curriculum working, et cetera, and McGuffey is the one who actually got back to me, and they had said that they started through the 6 through 8. That's where it's been, and the implementation has been fine. They said the company has been very good. That what they're doing now is they're doing the reverse. They're now going back to Curriculum Associates or Ready, and they're getting it into the K-5, which we are the reverse. We did K-5 this year, now we're bringing it into the 6-8. But they did not have anything negative saying about the programming or the professional development that they had, but they did feel that those 5th graders coming into 6th grade didn't have that background. So that's where
And ours don't.
ours are currently, this year is the first year we're using the new curriculum.
We're down there 25, aren't we, on 5th grade math?
We absolutely, the scores are on the back, the proficiency scores.
No, Erie.
Very last row is ours.
Yeah.
Yes, Erie Public Schools, we have right down there.
Yeah.
It's on there.
We're actually 18. What are we?
14.5, so the last 3 years, we've seen a decline where those schools saw an increase which was greater than the state increase, so.
Correct. And so one of the biggest things we wanted to see is to be able to give our students everything that they need. I do have to say, when we were looking at data analysis as well with PVOS, our teachers in the middle school and in mathematics, they know their content, they know their work, they didn't have the resources. So our hope is that this will give them the resources that they need, not only to get the PVOS and the growth up, but to continue to work to get our proficiency levels up.
What did we use after, was it CMP? Is that what we were using?
That was a while ago.
We were using CMP.
We were piloting,
Kentucky Notebooks came after CMP, and then for the last 2 years, we piloted MyMath, which was a grant-funded program that gave us new resources. And actually, it was great timing, because our middle school teachers had a chance to compare that to what we looked at in this review, and they knew the shortcomings. They knew they needed more multi-step problems, because PSSA requires them to do that. They needed more open-ended, constructed response type problems, because there were not enough in those MyMath resources. MyMath was Common Core Standards and There's about 15% of eligible content that's not covered in Common Core, but it is in PA Core, so it is going to be on our PSSA test. So teachers had to compensate for that themselves. They had to build in that content to try to get their kids, what they needed and what they were going to be assessed on. Ready does all of that. So they looked at this as, a time saver for them, which is one factor, but it gives them time to focus on their pedagogy and their instructional practices and how to deliver this best. And it is a shift because it has discourse routines and things that are built into the program to make the rigor and math practices come to life. So they were, it was an overwhelming, like as we looked at the materials, it was like, wow, oh my gosh, I will never have to do this again. These things that they've been having to supplement with. So, any other questions about the summary?
The only other thing I would like to share is with the iReady, which is the computer part of it. One of the things when we look at it, teachers will assess someone. Then they have to analyze it and they have to then decide, okay, how am I going to get interventions for the kids that didn't get it? With the new programs, and this is just one, but with the new programs, they do that for you once you assess. So they will group the students and say, Johnny, Susie, Emily, they need help in this. So a teacher can then say, all right, I have to make sure that I'm going to do a little small group work to make sure I support that student in getting that group of students. It is very different than many of the other programs that we've had in the past.
No,
Okay.
one thing I just want to, I'm
For
sorry.
like half the state, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
You
Glenn.
go ahead, sure.
One of the things I do want to say is, whatever program that we implement, make sure that we're working with some of the centers that are doing after-school programs, because they do have homework help, and if they can't do the homework, the
Yes.
kids, so please keep that in mind, the community centers or the church, whoever has an after-school tutorial homework program, if you can maybe in-service the work.
That's a great point because the students, as long as they can access the internet, they can log into the tutorial, the computer component of this, and work at their own level, in their own pathway. So that is a great point to share with people who are helping with homework.
And in addition to that, it's a great idea, Gwen, maybe even offering some parent nights for if the teachers start feeling like I'm getting resistance from, and you're all laughing, but I
There's
have to
a-
do those.
No,
Yeah.
we're working on it yet, because that was a recommendation out of the
Oh, was it?
retreat, so we're in the process of.
Yes,
putting
okay.
that together. So we can
Yeah.
include the center.
If we could get them to buy in as well, because.
Parents?
Yeah, the parents. 'Cause they
There
just-
is good correspondence for home that you send home, but does it get home? Do the kids like throw it out in your garbage can before they even walk out of your room?
And only
We
if
don't
it's
know
a
that.
need, only if it's a need,
Right.
obviously.
But also our Title I and school-wide support, they do the parent nights and the open houses, and they have included all information about the new curriculum, because it's a big shift for families, for students who are expected to perform at a higher level of rigor. It takes time to build that stamina for teachers who are learning alongside the students. It's challenging, but it's so needed.
How about the fifth grade teachers? Do they realize what's being expected now of the sixth grade? Are they kind
They
of-
can see the
Are
toolbox.
they on board, or, kind of like that follow through that you lack?
Six- Yeah, sixth grade is really excited about it, because those fifth graders are gonna come to them with the same routines already instilled, with the look of the materials, the student consumables already established. But
Are they working together to ease the process?
it's a good idea. We could certainly do that. That would be a worthy teacher meeting, because they could explain, the kinds of obstacles they've encountered with doing this for the first year. That's a great idea.
We'll be able to give you more data. Right now, for the elementary schools, the iReady, the diagnostic is being done so that we can see what they did in September and then see what they have in January. That's for everything, for the DIBELS, for CKLA, for CDTs in the middle and the high school. So we're going to be analyzing the data at our data summit on February 3rd in preparation of saying, okay, what's happening in the elementary school? Are we seeing big progress? And our hopes to do that. But to get the 5th grade and the 6th grade together, that's a great idea. It's one of those things that we'll put in along with the parent nights.
I want to ask too, what about the administrator buy-in?
They,
Now, are the administrators, since they're going to have to go in and evaluate, are they,
They were all invited to join in the committee work.
And what was that?
Several of them did, like Holly Northrup from East was actually a member of the committee as an administrator, and Rick Schneider at Wilson, he also came.
Nora, one of the other things that with these companies, we are on January 30th having iReady coming in to do walkthroughs with our administrators. So they're actually going into classrooms at Piper Burley, they're going into classrooms at Edison that is using the materials, and then to say, okay, how do I evaluate it? A teacher, what am I looking for? They've done look-fors themselves, but now getting the company in. It gives us a little bit more leverage, because we've done it and we're doing it with them, but then getting them in with the administration. So the same thing would happen with the middle school under the PD.
how about the special ed supervisors? Shouldn't they be included in this?
Absolutely. The leadership training that they have built in, there's a training that occurs before adoption. We did it last summer for elementary school, and everyone is invited. All administrators are invited to that.
But are they going?
Yes,
They are going.
yes.
And
Angie's making sure of that, and she has been
Just
making sure of
asking, Angie,
that.
they are going. They're not blowing it off.
And then it's ongoing throughout the year, the leadership training. There are touch points for administrators like the one B just described on January 30th.
Somewhere you had something?
Yes, our level at 14.5 has to be one of the lowest in the state, right?
I don't know the
I mean,
answer
it's
to
half,
that.
it's 37 is the state average, we're at 14.5.
Again, as we shared at the board retreat, our achievement level is consistent with our peers as far as
It's one of the
comparing
lowest in the state though,
socioeconomics.
right?
Here's
Here's the argument I want to make. You can spend all this money on this program, but you need some discipline in these students. And you have talked about stopping social passing. What is the level that you're going to establish for mathematics to get into middle school? Are you going to say you have to be at 20%? I think you should be saying something like that. There should be some rigor in it. These kids are done in by the time they hit 6th grade. Looking at those test scores, the math, we're bad in English, we're bad in the English, but at least it kind of holds in. The math, they don't get it in the first year, and it keeps going down after that. I mean, it's like they're hopeless by the time they hit middle school. So if you want to improve it in the middle school, you've got to stop this social passing, and I think we should set standards to get them from 5th to 6th grade on those tests.
I think maybe a first step is, having equity in our resources that the students are exposed to. I mean, they have been working with subpar resources
Right.
for years. So now, for the first time, we have a new implementation in elementary school, so those students have high-quality resources that are aligned to our state assessment on many levels that nothing that we had before was. Aligned to our higher standards that have been implemented since the Common Core. And so now we're moving that up to middle school to give these kids an opportunity. I mean, it's almost like a fighting chance. Because when you're working with whatever your teacher has pieced together for you that doesn't even look interesting, or that came from print shop in, black and white, and, I mean, we can't compare, it's not even apples to apples.
You have kids in the pipeline before this change, which was just a year ago, that are hopeless at this moment in mathematics. I think you should hold them in the elementary school till they hit a certain level, which will make it easier than in the middle school.
I agree, but I think we have to
Social
first.
passing is what we do around here. We pass our
We do
problems
not-
on to the school.
I have to say,
The scores are low, you're
We
not failing the
understand the
kids,
scores
they're
are
not
low.
getting better. you're just passing them on and say, okay, now this is your
I
problem.
would love for you to come into the buildings and
I'm
see
looking
our
at the
students.
test scores. I'm
And
looking at the test
I-
scores. They're
and-
horrible.
And test scores
They're
are
the
one
worst
piece.
problem that the
Mr.
district
Sumner.
has.
She's trying
Yes.
to.
One piece of a child's life. A child's life has more than just that one piece. And it may be their weakness is math, but if we look at their literacy and we look at their science and we look at what their drive is, and we can support the students. That's been our goal. We sap our children if they need support and help. I'd love for you to see the students in action when they're excited about it. We just brought STEM back, computer to kids, family and consumer science, the things that kids like. We added art, music, more gym classes. Then only this is a huge piece. Yes, I agree with you. And we need to continue to work for it. But we also need to see a child's whole life. They might love to have sports. Our H&PE teachers can add math to it. That's part of the comprehensive piece that we're doing. We are really trying to do that. Giving us this opportunity to give our children the technology and the brand new 6 through 8 math is one step, and we're asking for you to support us with that. And we will continue to work hard for our students. And hopefully, by the end of this year and next year, we're going to see a rise in those scores.
And I can show one, I'm sorry.
I just want to point out too, when we look at the 14.5% proficiency level at the elementary school, we have about 700 kids at each grade level. So that means we're holding more than 650 of those students back for each grade level. It's just not a sustainable pattern for us to implement. You know, it just
Right.
it wouldn't be sustainable to do that. So that's why we have to take this more comprehensive approach of starting to build out the capacity. You know, certainly these students at the higher grade level are coming in with you know, less skills, but these programs are holding them to a higher standard, and we're seeing it at the elementary levels. A lot of the teachers, as they're starting to look at these materials in math and ELA, they didn't think that the kids could do the work. They can do the work. So it's just a mind shift, just
They're
trying to move
engaged.
them and move them forward.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we have to be at 50, but if it's 14.5, we want to do better, maybe they should be at 20 or 18. You know what I mean? There should be some, that was brought up at our meeting. You said you wanted to have these hard, you know, in
And
5th and 9th grade, you wanted to make sure the kids
did.
made
We
it to
did,
the next
right,
school
but we
level.
have-
So
we-
I'm just repeating what I was
Yes,
told.
we.
I did listen a little
At the
bit.
middle school, we have implemented that, so they have to pass a certain number of classes to move forward. If they don't pass those classes, they have a couple different options. Either they take summer school and pass those courses there, or they repeat the grade, or they can go to credit recovery the following year and work there to get caught up. So we're starting to do that at the middle school level. At this point, we just don't feel that that's appropriate at the elementary level as we build it out.
Mr. President. I guess I'd just like to reiterate what B and Nora both said, is that I don't think that our students have had a full fighting chance for the past while now. They haven't been able to get the resources that they need, and these teachers have really fought quite hard with the tools that they had at their disposal. And I think that when we were in this budget crisis, we were forced to make choices regarding curriculum that were not in the child's best interest, and they were what we were forced to swallow. I do think that our children, the fact that they are still coming and they are brilliant and resilient, I don't know that I would go as far as using the term hopeless to describe some of them. I think that they're doing the very best that they can, and being reduced down to a test score that's not even meaned on what most of these kids, who they are, being a minority, being anything other than cisgender heteronormative white child, is reductionary. And I think that these students, when given the right opportunity and the right resources, will absolutely excel. And so I am excited, and I'm very eager for what you guys have done. And I know that you have, with the community schools, we're finally able to address what we've known has been happening with these kids, and they're enduring systemic trauma and systemic oppression outside of the school. And the school is picking up areas that schools were never built to sustain. And our district is doing the very best that they can to build up these kids who haven't had any resources. And it's not always the parents' fault. We've got systemic failure going around the parents as well. So I think just being all-encompassing, that the scores on these sheets are not an accurate reflection and all around of what the district has done and what we're going to do for the students.
Sumner is voicing a legitimate concern that's out there in the public, and that demand and wanting rigor in that we expect of the kids, but we need as an organization to keep this healthy tension between what you're trying to do and your innovations and your renewed efforts and your expanded efforts, and the argument and the concern he's expressing. We need to just maintain that tension to demand better and seek to get it. So we're not at odds necessarily, but there needs to be that healthy tension that results matter, and so does what you're saying. I'm trying to remind everybody that we're not at war with each other here. We're on the same page.
We're here for the children, that's the
That's right. All right.
Just one other thing I wanted to point out of the resources that you have, and of course you can spend some time with those and send us any questions that you might have about them. But this is a nice sampler that they put together for 7th grade. It's split in half, where the first half is the student experience of what, it's exactly what their book looks like. It's the lesson 9 and 10 for 7th grade. So you can get a sense of this, and if you page through, you'll see they take a great amount of care to show diversity in all of their examples, in their pictures, in their covers. They really were targeting more populated areas and trying to help students see themselves in the examples and the pictures in these texts. And then the second half is the teacher accompanying resources for the same 2 lessons. So you can see the pacing guide, all of the standards, how everything is broken down for the teacher. And I just thought it was a nice thing to put together, to see what the students are going to actually experience and what our teachers are experiencing, at least in this one sample.
Any other comments and concerns on the middle school math curriculum recommendation?
When does this, we're going to vote on this? And after we vote on this, are we voting on this on January 22nd? Okay.
For next year.
Yeah, we-
It
Oh,
would be
it's
for
not
next
gonna
year.
start this
No,
year.
no, no,
In the
no.
fall.
This is saying that next year we would begin it.
So
Isn't anybody piloting it? A school?
Well, we're actually, this is the same program we implemented at the elementary level.
Right.
So we do have experience with it.
And 6th grade over at Eagles Nest is using it as
That's
well.
right.
So they're piloting it,
Yeah.
so I'll see it tomorrow
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you can.
then. All righty then.
And we're following the same pattern we did last year with the curriculum, where we're asking for approval now and ordering them so that we can have the materials here and in the teachers' hands before they leave for the summer.
Okay, all right.
And that also allows us, we probably have training set up for the end of the
We
year.
usually tried it, like last year we did it at the last few days of school. We did 2 full days of training with the company coming in, so then they had the materials over the summer if they wanted to familiarize themselves with everything.
Okay.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Nora. Next item is the regular board agenda items as they exist now for January 22nd's meeting. Is there any comments, questions, or concerns about those as understood at this point?
I don't have any concerns. I was just wondering what IMIX technology is, 6.12. Annual Kronos
What
maintenance.
was the number, Donna?
6.1.
So, the payroll software that we use that does with the timekeeping is Kronos.
Okay.
That is the annual upgrade and maintenance fee on the actual program.
I think Sumner raised a concern maybe at the retreat or prior to it. Is there have we considered, is there anything we can do to expand a little bit, maybe perhaps double the amount of information that's provided per item? I mean, we used to get an exhaustive one, and we shrunk it down to this when we went electronic. I think he raised that question. I just wondered if that's been looked at or considered to do a better job on the printed form, even to have a bit more clarifying amount of information provided to.
Is it on board docs, the additional detail, would we just print out?
You have to go
I think
look
more
at
detail.
If there is additional detail, you can click
Yeah.
on it, on board docs, and it'll give you the information.
And you can print out a detailed agenda also instead of a simple agenda.
That's, I guess, what I was looking.
We don't print it out because it would probably be about 40, 50 pages.
I was looking for something in the middle, but if it's available that way, that's.
It is. And if that's something you would like for me to provide for you, Mr. Nichols, at each meeting, I can do that.
Well, what I was thinking is, what's posted on the website that shows the activity of the board are these agendas and you know, they're very bare bones in the information they provide us to what was discussed and such. So it doesn't.
The detail is on the agenda for
Okay.
the public to view. Once we make it live on Friday, everything is there for the public. All the
Okay,
detail.
okay. Well, I'll look at that. But that's what I was thinking. We wanted to show some of the
There it is.
struggles we.
She's gonna show you
You know,
exactly.
there's no
But when he
100%.
says on Friday, he means.
Mr. Nichols,
Yeah.
So it's right there on
this
the
is
board.
where you find it.
So if you want to click on one of those, Angela, just to show the, so there's the board rules, and we actually have a description as well as the actual rules that the board is going to be considering, or did consider in January, correct?
Yeah.
So step by step, you can get to the detail.
Okay.
Wow. What
So
you
if
just
you-
mentioned about the Friday, that's not this coming Friday, that's the Friday 5 days ahead
Yes,
of the board meeting.
I'm thinking we're next week.
You can also somewhere click up on meetings,
Uh-huh.
and then that drops down and you can see the drafts.
Okay.
So
So there's a-
you can start to analyze things, you know, a couple weeks before the meeting. Sometimes a skeleton.
Okay, okay.
And then you pull up the
And
actual
then pull up-
contracts or the actual purchase orders or all the specifics.
really?
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
And the public can do that too?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wow. I'm just computer illiterate.
It requires more of us than it used to, but it is available. That answers my question. I needed to be reminded. Any other matters on the agenda draft? Any other matter for this meeting? We have an executive session. We're going to have an executive session tonight, but are there any other matters on anyone's mind? I could think of one thing. Tyler and I met last Friday with the superintendent and his staff and to prepare this agenda for tonight. And that's how that is going to work in the coming year. And so that we're aware as a board and we can go back and forth a little bit. I brought up the concern, and the superintendent took some notes, and I'm hitting him cold with this. I don't know if he's ready to answer, but I expressed the concern that we have our channel on cable television, and when people tune into the meetings, they don't get to see the meeting. They get a sign that says the meeting's in progress or something like that. I've badgered Dawn and Andy at different times about what we do audio and visually. And I think, I'll ask you, Dawn, if you want to, but I want to put you on the spot, but these meetings are recorded and obtainable or viewable on YouTube?
Yes, on our YouTube page, it's Erie's Public Schools. Go to YouTube, click Erie's Public Schools. If you click on videos, you can see all the videos that we do.
And you can separate committee of the whole from regular meeting?
Yes, the committee of the wholes will show up. It'll have committee of the whole, and then the date that we held the meeting. And then the board meetings are live. We go live to YouTube. And then we also put up the meeting afterwards.
I have tried and failed to find committee of the whole meetings on YouTube, and I've gotten used to what you're telling me, but is there any reason why, since we have that channel, that we can't use it?
We also put up the meetings on Channel 8 after the fact. So
Why can't
within
we
the
do
next
that?
2 days. What's that?
I didn't realize that. I don't know anybody that's seen them.
So we did, Neil has done some
Oh,
research
okay.
on that.
All right.
I think Neil and Don.
So, first off, there was a technical glitch that did occur at East Middle School where there was a power supply that went bad. Power supply was fixed, so it's back up and running. Now this is where it kind of gets interesting. So apparently Spectrum, the cable provider, is no longer utilizing it under Channel 8. At some time, it was actually moved to Channel 68 without really us knowing. Then again, it was moved, so now it is it's actually channel 1023 on Spectrum TV.
Live?
So it's the same Channel 8 feed, only it's not Channel 8 anymore, it's channel 1023.
Can we get the word out on our website so that people know that?
Yes, and
Because-
Erica is here because we, after having that discussion, we do have some ideas on how to actually better utilize that channel to get some information out to the
Well,
public.
that's good. Do you want to do it now, or do you want to do it in a future committee of the whole?
Sure, I can just briefly mention that we do consider that as another one of our platforms to get all of our information out. And so the thought is that with now the awareness that it's been moved to a new channel, obviously we need to publicize that, and we plan to do that in conjunction with announcing perhaps some new offerings that we might bring to that channel, in addition to the standard, the production of the lunch menu, things like that, some new unique things that we can put on that channel, but also use across our other platforms, including the website and our Facebook page.
Some people may not have access to computers, but the television might give them access to I don't know that there's hordes of them, but I think gradually we've driven people away, just being out of touch, not connected with them.
So the fact that this has moved to a new channel presents a unique opportunity to hopefully get people re-engaged. We don't know what numbers that will be, but we can make the effort to publicize that and to introduce some new content
And so
along
which-
with that.
What channel is it now?
1023.
Is it just broadcast once, or is it on a loop of
It's
some
my
sort?
understanding
There
it's
is a
on a
schedule.
loop.
Where it's shown every day or every other day for a while?
It'll be shown every day until we change the schedule, until we have, the next meeting comes up, so it'll be shown for the rest of the month until the next meetings come up for the board meeting.
We are the only thing on the channel?
No, we'll have other things. Yeah, it depends on what's going on in the district. So other events that we film, we put those
I
up.
see, I
But
see.
yes, it is a
Plays, musicals,
But it is repeated several
Graduation
times?
ceremonies?
Yeah.
graduations.
Okay, I see.
Christmas
We did a
concerts.
better job in the past, and suddenly we went off the air, and that's where we're at now.
True.
Uh, I've said at other meetings that more happens right here where we are given presentations and interact the way we do, and we tend to do a better job of that here than we do at East. And I think we should work on that and have more of our discussions there, but this is hasn't ever been on the channel. This is on YouTube, or has this been on the channel?
This
Should
will go,
this? Could
this
this?
will go on the channel,
Tonight?
tomorrow.
Okay.
Put it up tomorrow.
Well, then I'm satisfied with that. I just think that's good use of the channel, because I think an interested citizen wanting to know what's going on at the school district, they can't crowd this room, and if they want to tune in,
We
no
could
one-
stream this live on YouTube. If that's something that the board would like to do, we could do that.
Well, I don't know if it's doable, I wouldn't oppose it. I'm not necessarily, we don't have to do anything extreme or difficult. I just think we should do everything we can to let the public hear us deliberate, so that they hear the questions and hear the answers and hear what it is we're trying to do. The give and take between Sumner and B and Nora was worthwhile television.
Priceless.
No, I don't mean that you guys are good or bad actors, I just mean it's important, and it's important give and take between an administration and a policy-making board that represents the community. It's what it's all about, so, thank you.
Hey, it was
And thank you, Neil, for looking into it.
Now, will it be on Channel 8?
1023.
1023, okay.
Yes.
All right, so you're going to put something up saying that 1023 is,
This channel has been moved to.
Oh,
We were
okay.
thinking about making some original content also and putting that on, but we're not sure if we're there yet.
We were talking about math and talking about ELA and having the librarians
Years
read
ago,
stories.
years ago, the
Yeah,
board wanted that, and I think we tried it. I don't know what happened,
What
and I'm
happened
going
to
way
it?
back. But when
I
we
saw
originally
it.
started with the channel, that's what was done. There was homework, thought of to put homework on and
That
homework out.
is what we're hoping.
Yeah.
Facebook, the story reading went to Facebook.
Right,
The principal
Karen
was-
Ryan
Right.
did that over the summer break, or the winter break, the Christmas break, she was doing it.
She's here if you want to talk to her about it.
I watched it.
So we have the whole channel.
But,
Well, 8 sounded better.
but it's on YouTube nonetheless.
Stuck with you.
It's on YouTube and it also simultaneously, I mean, it's also on, it's not one or the other anymore. All right.
Now, if I ask, where it says any other matter,
That's where we are.
okay. I have a matter I'd like to bring up too, as a matter of fact, but they're not in, we're not gonna vote on them or anything.
Whatever is a matter you want, if it's a concern or an interest or a question, now's the time to do it.
Okay.
Fine to do it now.
Okay. During the years I was a principal, and I bet Bea can answer that, and Teresa, that, you know, you get overwhelmed with doing evaluations and your assistants are helping you. But where I found I needed a lot of help with is we had supervisors of special ed. And why isn't it they should be held accountable for these programs? And why aren't they coming in at least evaluating the first-time teachers one time, and then the principal or assistant or whatever the second time? I mean, that's an excellent resource that's sitting here, and then they would feel more attached to their buildings and their people. That's something I want everybody to think about.
Rose,
The-
can
I
Teresa
can
answer
address
that?
Yeah.
Briefly.
Okay.
So we had a meeting in August, actually it might have been July, where we brought all of the folks together and reviewed what the PAE-TEP process was, which is the teacher evaluation system. And we asked principals and special ed supervisors to work together, and Linda with EL, to kind of divvy up some of those responsibilities. So we kind of put that on our administrators to figure out if, you know, we can double check it to make sure that's happening.
It is. I mean,
yeah.
they're definitely,
Yeah.
they're doing that.
Oh,
They're doing evaluation.
So they are, the
They are.
supervisors are?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, and we just really focused on that this year, so we're gonna try and continue to move it forward. Because it is really overwhelming, especially with, you know, we've got 60 or so brand-new teachers. Double those evaluations, you're looking at 120 right there.
Yeah, and that's, you know, sometimes the resources, the day gets busy in a
Sure.
school,
Sure.
and you can't get out to evaluate.
Sure.
The other thing, I went to, well, I did a lot over the Christmas break. I went to a couple schools and saw Christmas things, and there was this excellent, the program I saw at Vincent was outstanding. The people that, the choral director and the band director, or whoever he was, the maestro, as I called him, he was excellent. And he had, the amount of kids he had on that stage, and that man was pooling those kids and the enthusiasm they had. Isn't there a way we could recognize our people better? Now, I was asking Ken here if, like, do we recognize the teachers in this STEP program that you do?
Stair climb.
Yeah, stair climbing. I mean, is there a way we can, you know, tell them we appreciate them, giving them an award, or just recognition, run something for them? I mean, they work hard. They deserve the recognition. Okay, think about it.
I think we have done some of that, haven't we?
We don't do the,
We had in the past.
do we have a retirement thing when people are leaving? Do we have like
will
something
this
to
year.
tea? Or do we just boot you out the door and say,
Boot
thanks,
you out the
Steve.
door.
Appreciate your years of
I got
service."
booted.
But, you know,
One of the things, if you recall, we used to have a teacher of the year for each building.
Yep.
And then they had a dinner. But I know that prior to Bill, it was brought to the administration of the EEA, and they were concerned that it was taking away from all of the staff who are working very hard. And so it would be something that we'd have to bring forward with the union to say, hey, we would like to recognize, and what's the criteria to determine what it is that does the goes above the extra mile?
I just want our staff recognized. There's outstanding people there.
I think some schools, it might be different, but I know at McKinley, we acknowledge teachers. I think the school-wide does it. I'm not sure exactly whose hands it in, but they get a picture, they get a free park, they get a parking space, like up front with the name test, like a badge and everything. So it might just be contingent upon the school, but it definitely happens. I can speak on behalf of McKinley, it happens there.
Well, maybe we could bring it up to the principals or something, or if you just want to kill the idea, but I just,
We actually have a monthly meeting with the association, so we can certainly discuss it at that point.
okay. Those are my only 2 points. Thank you.
This is when you can, and on almost every one of our agendas, there's a point where it says any other matter, and for your new board members, you can raise any question, make any suggestion, ask for an explanation, announce that you want to pursue something, at a future meeting. It's a catch-all thing, and it's be comfortable bringing up anything that's a concern to you during that.
Oh, then I have another concern.
But you only get 2. I'm kidding.
Oh, no, now I'm on a roll.
I'm kidding.
What are we doing about the nurses? That's got to be brought up. Is there a shortage? Are we not getting subs? What's going on?
Yes,
Okay, Teresa.
we had interviews yesterday. We only attracted 3 candidates. And in speaking with one of the candidates, who just is an RN, is working at another organization for $36 an hour. So we have a very hard time competing because of the nursing shortage everywhere. We have a very hard time competing, drawing folks away from other organizations unless they are looking for more of a set schedule as the school day is. So we are struggling with that, recruiting and retaining.
Isn't it something that you might kind of look at somewhere down the line? We have our Erie High students in the nursing program, capitalizing and utilizing them to get them, like we're talking about the apprentice program, but you have students who are in the medical field and they're working at St. Mary's or somewhere like that, maybe utilizing them or even with some of the local colleges that have nursing programs because they need internships and work study.
Sure. So, when we do have nurses come to us, unless they are CSNs, the certified school nurses, they have to actually go back to school. And they have to obtain that certified school nursing certificate, and that can be costly to them as well. So that's an obstacle that we face as well.
Could we help them?
Good question.
I would love that.
Well,
Give them an
somewhere in
incentive.
charge, everybody will go free.
No, because like, at the daycare that we have, we give our teachers who wants to, they go for their CDA. So we do pay for the first time around, and it's up to you to keep it up or you lose.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if there's something that we could do to assist.
So
Food for thought.
our school nurses are under the collective bargaining unit with the EEA, so we don't reimburse for classes. They do get a pay bump for every 6 credits.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we are now.
Gotcha.
And how are we on subs as far as are we still pooling nurses from other schools and making them cover too?
Sometimes. Not as often, not very often, but sometimes.
What's the liability on that? I mean, suppose they're at another school and one of their kids gets hurt at the other school and...
Especially if they have a diabetic student or...
I mean, technically, there doesn't even, the regs don't even really require that there's a school nurse in every building, during the whole school day. We, do our best to provide that. But,
And, you know, we try to do everything, we take all that into consideration when we have these situations and make sure that if we're splitting somebody between two buildings, which as Teresa said, doesn't happen very often. But when it does, we try to make sure that it's two buildings that are really close together and, you know, that have, you know, a lower enrollment of students that have, you know, acute needs so that, you know, there's less chance of an emergency happening, but if it does, the nurse doesn't have to go far, or we have to call 911 if there's an emergency, just like they do in the private school.
Couldn't there be someone within the building? Never mind.
You know, it just depends.
Right,
I just said
but
never
we did add another traveling position this year to cover some of our alternative sites. So Emerson Gridley, Booker T. Washington, and Eagles Nest. So we do have kind of an extra floater. Unfortunately, sometimes when flu season hits and, you know, people are out, it's kind of playing a chess game and covering, so.
And Gwen, back to what you were saying, the things that we're allowed to cover that way, we have been trying to do, like the EpiPen administration, for instance, that is something that lay people can get trained in, and we have had some of our people get trained in the EpiPen administration, so if there is an emergency, that there are other people who could, you know, address something like that, but there's only certain things that we can, you know, cover that with.
That's why I said never mind.
Yeah.
So let me get this
Okay.
right. You don't really have to put a nurse in every building?
Well, the regs don't really require that we have a nurse in every building every day, all day, so that's not really what, you know, but we want that in our buildings.
So when do we have to have a nurse full-time? So if there's a diabetic child, is there any other scenario where we have to have a nurse? I just remember this from when I was a Piper and Nurse Rita was.
So I guess it depends on how you look at it, because if there is a child that has such an acute need that, you know, they really can't be in school unattended without a nurse, how that's covered right now is really with a lot of the private agencies, and a lot of times that's covered by the student's medical assistance insurance. They'll have like a, you know, a one-to-one nurse with them.
But a diabetic child wouldn't have a one-to-one nurse with them, would they?
Sometimes, depends on how severe.
Depends on how severe it is.
Seizures,
seizure
That's what I've
disorders.
seen.
It depends on
That's
how severe. But we do, I mean, we want our children to be safe, you know what I mean? So I think we go above and beyond what the regs require.
I know, but the law says there has to be a nurse for every so many kids.
1,500,
Yeah, I'm looking for the number right now.
Right.
it's 1 to 1,500.
I had that, you should have just asked me.
There's a lot of controversy around it, and there's a lot of, you know, kind of loose language, you know, that's up for interpretation about, you know, about it. But, and if there's a lot of debate around it right now.
So under the law, we're required to have 7 nurses. And how many do we have?
More than that.
I guess the question is, are we asking them to perform a job that they can't physically perform because they have so many responsibilities? And if they're being pulled to cover, and I'm sure it's the same thing that's happening with our teachers with the lack of subs. But at what point, at what point do we continue to allow them to work in a job that they can't possibly be successful at because they don't have enough time in the day to do it?
Again, I think if you go back to Teresa's point here, this is, we are at a historic low on the unemployment rate. We have shortages across the district, not only nurses,
Right, I
the
know that.
substitutes, bus drivers. If you want to throw a lot of money at us, we'll certainly give you a proposal to try to attract additional people. But we're doing the best we can with the resources we have at this point.
So I guess I'm just worried that we keep losing them. So what can we do to
Keep them.
$36 an hour.
Maybe, and that even goes back to what Rose was saying, and that maybe they need some acknowledgement or just to listen to them and offer them some viable supports for how they can get some of their paperwork done and their screenings done and the things that I think are stressing them out right now.
Well, Angie, you're planning a meeting, right?
Yeah, we're gonna get together and, you know, kind of brainstorm.
Another thing, if it's paperwork, we could look at some clerical support for that, couldn't we?
Right. Could we
Yeah.
look at that? Yeah. Thanks.
That's a great idea.
That's a great
Yeah,
idea.
that is great.
Well, this has been a good meeting, but it's not over. We have an executive session. So, no, I mean that. It's been productive and useful, but we've been here 3 hours, haven't we? And it's been worthwhile, but it's not over. We have to go to executive session. So we'll recess from here to conference room 3, and we'll adjourn there when that part of the meeting is over. Thank you, everyone, staff and board, for being so involved. Good meeting.